Welcome to Marking the End Times. I'm Mark Hitchcock, and as always, it's great to have you with us. And this is a program that we do every week, and it's intended to help you understand what's happening in our world today through the lens of Bible prophecy. And there's a lot happening in our world today that we need to understand to really understand the times in which we find ourselves. And what I want to do today is I want to talk about the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount, there's been a lot of rising tension there here in the last couple of weeks. And that's really the prophetic hotspot in all the world. You know, many people have said over the years that Israel is God's prophetic timepiece. And I really believe that's true. I mean, as Israel goes, so goes the prophetic scenario. But if Israel is God's prophetic timepiece, you could say in many ways that Jerusalem is kind of the hour hand. But then you could say even beyond that the Temple Mount is the second hand on God's timepiece. So I want to talk about some things that have been happening there on that Temple Mount area. And then I want to we'll go into the subscriber section in just a bit. And there's a question there about the control of weather. There's a really good question about the tribulation period, those who die during the tribulation period, during that 7-year period of time, kind of what we call tribulation saints. What's going to be their status during that period of time? There's another question about the rapture of the church and what happens to those who die before the rapture takes place. When are they going to be raised? When are they going to be rejoined to their resurrected bodies? So when we get to the subscriber section, we'll answer those questions. But I want to talk, as I said, about the Temple Mount, a little bit of teaching about that. It's something I think we hear about a lot, but maybe we're not familiar with just how significant really that is in Bible prophecy. My wife Cheryl and I were there on the Temple Mount about a month ago. We led a group of about 100 people over to Israel, and that's always one of the most fascinating places to visit is that 37-acre platform that's known as the Temple Mount. Now, in Islam, it's known as the Noble Sanctuary. But obviously for the Jewish people, it's the Temple Mount because the two Jewish temples that have been built and destroyed were constructed there. Solomon's temple and then the temple that was built by Zerubbabel and later embellished by King Herod. But the Temple Mount is significant because it's a holy site for both Islam and for Judaism. For Islam, it's the third holiest site, and obviously for the Jewish people, it is the holiest site for them. And all that remains of it today is that Western Wall. That's why Jewish people go there today to worship. It's also the ancient place of Mount Moriah, where Abraham took Isaac to offer him, and of course God stays his hand. But it's the third holiest site in Islam because they believe that's where it's from the Temple Mount that Muhammad went to heaven. And here in the last week or so, about a couple weeks, there's been a lot of turmoil there. There was a group of Islamic followers who locked themselves in what's called the AlAqsa Mosque. And I'll talk in a moment about what that is and the significance of that. But they locked themselves there, and Jewish soldiers, Israeli soldiers, went and got them out of there and dislodged them from there. It happened 2 days in a row. And it caused a huge furor in the Islamic world. And the reason that the AlAqsa Mosque is considered such a holy place is the word Jerusalem never occurs in the Quran. But in the Quran, it mentions that Muhammad, the night that he went to heaven, that he went on his final journey. And he was transported from Mecca, it says, to AlAqsa. And AlAqsa just simply means the farthest place. Now, it doesn't say that it's Jerusalem, it's just the farthest place. And then it's from there, on that area, that they believe he leaped to heaven from the place where the Dome of the Rock is today. So there's a mosque that's been built there called the AlAqsa Mosque. It's on the south part of the Temple Mount. And again, Al-Aqsa means this farthest place. And so in Islam, they believe that that's a reference to Jerusalem, which I think is fascinating because basically Satan knows that Jerusalem is the holy site for Israel. And this place called Al-Aqsa is mentioned in the Quran. And so they've made that now Jerusalem to have it really be a point of conflict with the Jewish people. It's a counterfeit place of worship. And so throughout this last month of Ramadan, 1 million Muslims have come to the Temple Mount area. In fact, just a couple days ago, 280,000 Muslims were there in one day worshiping. They were commemorating what's called the Night of Destiny, or the Night of Power, which commemorates what was supposedly the first revelation of the Quran that was given to Muhammad on that night. And many of them have gathered there as well, kind of as a show of force, because the Jewish soldiers about 2 weeks ago removed a lot of worshipers from the AlAqsa Mosque because they barricaded themselves in there. And this caused, again, a huge outbreak of violence. When that took place, rockets were fired from Gaza into Israel. There was a rocket barrage into Israel from Lebanon. And so the Temple Mount is this powder keg, or this prophetic flashpoint, or the trigger point, really for the relationship between Israel and Islam. Whenever these Jewish soldiers, took these people who were barricaded in the AlAqsa Mosque and removed them from there, the whole Muslim world responded. Iran said that Israel, for doing that, will suffer severe consequences. The nation of Jordan, who has management over the Temple Mount area. Now, Israel and Israeli soldiers really have control over the Temple Mount, but Jordan kind of has the management or custodianship of the Temple Mount. Jordan said, warned that if the AlAqsa Mosque was bothered anymore, Israeli forces did anything else there would be catastrophic consequences. So kind of as the Temple Mount goes, so goes relationships with the relationship between Israel and her Islamic neighbors. And basically, Iran has been threatening Israel in recent days. Israel had just a couple days ago was Holocaust Remembrance Day. And on Holocaust Remembrance Day, Iran has threatened to destroy Tel Aviv and Haifa, two of the main cities in Israel, if there's any slight Israeli provocation. So to me, it's tragically ironic that on Holocaust Remembrance Day, Iran is threatening to destroy Israel, destroy Tel Aviv and Haifa at the slightest provocation. Iran is recruiting militant allies to attack Israel, to launch kind of fresh waves of attack. Now, a lot of this is happening because of the internal strife that's been going on within Israel, but also in retaliation for Israeli forces taking action there on the Temple Mount. And it's interesting to me that kind of the one issue that really kind of galvanizes the entire Islamic world is the Temple Mount. Again, what they call the noble sanctuary. So you've got all these divisions between Islam, between the Sunni Muslims and Shiite Muslims and all kinds of divisions. But the one thing they're agreed upon is that this third holiest site is not to be bothered in any way by the Jewish people or by Israel. So the Temple Mount, that 37-acre platform there, again, is kind of the prophetic flashpoint in all the world. And the tensions right there now really are sky high. And a lot of that has occurred because there was an overlap between Passover, which is obviously a Jewish holiday or a Jewish commemoration, and Ramadan for Islam. So you kind of had this overlap, and the followers of Islam have just come out in a show of force, 1 million of them, really during Ramadan in this 1 month in Israel. But when you think about the Temple Mount and what's happening there today and how it's this real prophetic flashpoint, it's really ultimately going to be the site of 2 future Jewish temples. There's going to be a Jewish temple built there during the tribulation period. We often call that the tribulation temple. We know a temple will be built there because the Antichrist is going to come and desecrate that temple, and he's going to set up an image of himself in the Holy of Holies inside that temple. It says in 2 Thessalonians 2:4 that the Antichrist is going to sit in the temple of God. And the word there for temple means the inner sanctum, the Holy of Holies. And he's going to declare and display himself as being God. Well, obviously, for that to happen, there has to be a temple there. In Matthew 24:15, Jesus tells the Jewish people in the end times, when you see the abomination of desolation standing in the holy place, flee to the mountains. Well, obviously, there's going to have to be a holy place or a temple there that's going to be desecrated by the Antichrist. So that 37-acre Temple Mount area is going to be the place of a third Jewish temple that's going to become the tribulation temple that ultimately will become Antichrist temple. And it's going to be the epicenter of global worship of the Antichrist. as he sits there in the temple, declares he's God. But then when he leaves there, there's going to be an image constructed that will be placed there that all the world will worship. And so the Antichrist is going to rule the world economically. He's going to rule the world politically, but he's also going to rule the world religiously. And that's really the focus. The economic control he has and the political control that he has really are just ultimately so that he can have this religious control, so that he can be declared to be God. And so the Temple Mount is a major prophetic signpost. And people today wonder, I often wonder, with all that's happening over there, how will there ever be a third Jewish temple built there on the Temple Mount? It's one of the thorniest problems, I think, in all of Bible prophecy. But you remember, when you think about this, about 100 years ago, people often wondered, how in the world will the Jewish people ever come back to their homeland, as the Bible predicts? Well, beginning in 1948, it started. 6% of the Jews were in the world. Now over 40% of the Jews in the world are in the land of Israel. So what seemed impossible came to pass because it was part of God's plan. Now, I don't know how that temple will be rebuilt. Some believe that there'll be an earthquake there, that there's a fault line that runs through the Temple Mount area, and maybe the AlAqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock will be destroyed. Others believe that the Battle of Gog and Magog, that as all these Islamic forces come into Israel and their armies are destroyed, they will weaken them to such an extent that Israel then will be able to build their temple on the Temple Mount. Others would say that the Antichrist is going to come along and have such power that he's going to be able to broker some kind of a deal for the temple to be constructed there, this third Jewish temple. We don't know for sure how it will happen, but when my wife and I were in Israel, we went and visited the Temple Mount Institute, and I'm sure maybe some of you have been there on your trips to Israel, and they're doing all they can and preparing all the implements for that temple to be built there someday. But God's focus, the navel of the world, he says, is Israel. And within Israel, the focus is Jerusalem. And within Jerusalem, the bullseye is that 37-acre platform there of that Temple Mount. And what we see happening today, how it's just such a global flashpoint still today, is just another indication to me that the rapture could happen at any moment. That the Temple Mount is just a major prophetic signpost. And it just continues to be in the news day after day. And so, to me, this escalating signpost is another sign that the coming of Jesus Christ is near. And I just watch what's happening there and just think, how much longer can the pressure continue to build until the lid blows off? It's a sign to me that the coming of Christ is very near. We need to be ready. Well, as always, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for being a subscriber. If you're not a subscriber, you can go to endtimes.com for $7 a month and join the endtimes.com family as a subscriber and have access to all kinds of wonderful information. We're going to go now into that subscriber section where, again, I'm going to answer a question about tribulation saints, about those who die during the tribulation period. A question about human control of weather. And then also another question about those who die before the rapture, when they're going to be resurrected, and how they'll fit into God's prophetic program. Well, again, thank you for joining us, and we'll go now into the subscriber section to these questions.